All right, so this should be interesting since we're driving in the car, so I apologize for the jerkiness. Okay, so number 10. So you've got that function that says f of x is equal to 2 times and a bunch of crap. All right, that's in factored form. Because that's in factored form, those are also your zeros, but opposite in sign. So you know that your zeros, meaning where it strikes the x-axis, are going to be at the x values -3, -2, and +3.5. At that point, you can graph this if you want. I never do because I don't graph a lot, really. I'm a weird one that way. But once you've done that, you're going to create a bunch of intervals, and your zeros are going to be the endpoints to those intervals. So as you can see here, I've got -infinity to -3. So I'm looking at the function as it's coming into the 0, -3. And then I'm going from -3 to -2 between those two zeros, and then between the zeros for -2 and +3.5, and then from +3.5 out to infinity. Once you've got those 4 intervals identified, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to choose a value in those intervals. Make the value easy. That's all you have to do. So I'm going to choose things like halfway in between. I like the number 0, the number 1, -1. Those are typically pretty easy. In the cases of the extremes, like the -4 and +4, I'm literally choosing the very next integer. That's how I make my decision. So once you get this done and you list those out, those are going to be your test points. These little test points are the x values that you're going to put into your function. So we're going to test f of -4 to see if at -4 is this function above the x-axis, meaning do I get a positive, or is it below, meaning I get a negative. And now I do not have to know the answers to these problems in here. All I have to know is whether the answer will be positive or negative. So if it makes you feel better, do the actual calculations. But this +2 always stays positive, always stays out in front. You can actually completely ignore it because it has nothing to do with the zeros. But I just put it in there just for reference. So the +2 will be positive. -4 plus 3 is a -1. I do not care about the 1. I just need the negative. And then -4 plus 2 is going to be a -2. But again, I don't care about the 2. I just need the negative. -4 minus anything is going to be negative again. So we're just going to stay negative. And now when I'm going through here, I'm saying a positive times a negative is a negative. That stuff is negative times a negative is a positive. This positive stuff times a negative is a negative. So the whole function is negative at that point, which means because we don't have any more zeros, we can't cross the x-axis again. It has to continue going negative. So what you'll notice, it actually has this shape because it's a cubic. But on the next one, I'm doing the exact same thing. I'm choosing a value somewhere in between -3 and -2. I just chose -2.5 because I'm bored. And I plug that in for x. And so that 2 is going to stay positive. -2.5 plus 3 is positive in this case. It's a +1/2, but I don't care about the half. Same with the second one. -2.5 plus 2 is going to be negative. There's more negative than positive, so the answer is going to be negative. And -2 or 2.5 minus -3.5 is still going to be negative. Positive times positive is positive. Times a negative is negative. Times another negative is positive. So we have a positive value here. I do not care how big that positive is, just that it's positive. And so I mark it. So I know that because my test value came in this interval, that within this entire interval, there's a lot of background information in this, but because it's in this interval, this whole interval is positive. That's how I know that this has to be the case. That test value gave me a positive. Wash, rinse, repeat for 0 and 4. And so I'm going to let you walk through that by hand, but walk through it. Actually spend the time to walk through it. But you're going to get, for 0, you're going to get a negative because you've got an odd number of negatives. And for 4, you're going to get a positive because you've got no negatives. And all positives multiplied together give you a positive. That means that this last interval is also true. So in that case, it's going to be this interval, and this interval, And anytime you got two intervals and you want to unionize them, it's 1-2 slap at you. That's how I do it. All right, I hope this helps. Let me know if you need any more.